I learnt I had hepatitis C on the off chance after my recovery worker recommended I get tested. After a positive diagnosis, I didn't do anything with it. The thought of treatment intimidated me because I'd heard so many horror stories about how long and painful the treatment was, and I just didn't want to put myself through it. I think I put off treatment for roughly 7 years after I was positively diagnosed. During that time, I had no obvious side effects, and to be honest, I didn't ever get sick at all. Even the yearly cold and flu viruses would seem to bypass me. I later found out the reason I never experienced either the cold or flu was because my immune system was likely working harder than normal to fight my hepatitis C infection, which was damaging my liver. After about 6 years, I began to experience aches and pains in my joints as well as minor headaches. I was working long hours and I was up on my feet a lot, so I always put it down to that. I definitely think I was in some form of denial. Whenever I did feel bad, there was always the thought of, I wonder if this is related to my hepatitis, but I was always quick to dismiss it. I think the thing that held me back from seeking treatment was because of the stigma that comes with hepatitis C, and it wasn't until I caught up with an old mate that I experienced a real turning point. He confided in me about his own diagnosis of hepatitis C and told me all about the treatment he was receiving. Now, I had so many questions about the treatment, how painful it was, how long it lasted, the amount of tablets you need to take a day, and it turned out that everything I thought about the treatment was wrong. He told me it was nothing like I thought, and this is what really motivated me to check out my options. I spoke with my recovery worker and she told me about the specialist nurse that would be at the service once a week, and together we began a plan for treatment. I was told there were different genotypes of hepatitis C and mine was genotype 1, which is the most common. I had to take 2 different types of medication and completed regular blood tests throughout the 12 weeks of my treatment. It wasn't all easy for me, mind you. I was one of the ones who experienced some of the side effects. I was working long hours and the fatigue that the medication was causing made me want to stop the treatment before I even really began. This, alongside the headaches and nausea of the treatment, made it really difficult for me. I had to constantly remind myself of 3 things. With choices, I had freedom. This was my decision to undergo the treatment. Nobody forced me into this. I knew that my suffering was only temporary and it wouldn't last forever. And I knew that what I was working towards would be worth it. And that was a life without hepatitis C. The specialist nurse I worked with had suggested I should log my symptoms and the details of my treatment. I'm quite a meticulous person anyway, so this was easy for me to do. And it also helped me feel I was in control of my treatment and made me feel positive. I don't know if this was the treatment, but throughout the 12 weeks I became very emotionally sensitive. I could go from feeling absolutely nothing to feeling a wave of everything. I had to be careful with what I watched on TV. Anything too violent or gory would just make me feel physically sick. And even watching something like Disney's Coco with my daughter could have me in tears. It was suggested I take up mindfulness as a way of keeping myself grounded and relaxed. The idea sounded bollocks at first, but I found it really helped, and it's something I still continue to do even now after my treatment. I was lucky enough to have a team around me. My friend who had undergone the treatment himself was a huge support. The nurse who I had to regularly check in with was amazing, helping with all the practical aspects of my treatment and was able to answer any questions I had. My recovery worker again was absolutely amazing, helping me maintain my sobriety when things were getting difficult for me. My girlfriend was so supportive of me, and my daughter, unbeknownst to her, did more for me than she could ever know. Just looking at her and knowing I had to fight this so I could be there for her too. I'd always been quite a closed off person. My dad would tell me growing up as a kid that human beings are like islands. We are born alone, we'll live alone, and we'll die alone, which I later found out was a quote from Orson Welles. But the actual quote ends with, "Only through our love and friendship can we create the illusion for a moment that we're not alone." It was through this illusion of love and friendship that I created a support circle of family and friends I could confide in along the way. Listening to success stories of other hepatitis C patients always inspired me. It can be done, and I will do it, was something I'd regularly tell myself. Now I hope for sharing my story will inspire others too. I don't want people to feel judged about being Hep C positive the way I did. I learned that it doesn't matter how you got it, but what you're going to do about it. So take the steps, do the work, and don't quit.